Allo, allo, it's Nia. Welcome to AI Creator World Podcast, the place where creators learn how to grow faster, build smarter, and turn artificial intelligence into real opportunity. Here, we explore powerful AI tools, content strategies, personal branding systems, and new ways to create income in the digital era. If you are building something online, you are in the right place. Let's begin.
Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We are thrilled to have you with us today.
Yeah, really excited to get into this one.
Because it is 2026, and I think it's safe to say the days of needing thousands of dollars just to get a basic logo are officially over.
Completely obsolete. I mean, along with needing a professional graphic designer on retainer or, waiting weeks just for a functional draft.
Right, the agonizing waiting period.
Yeah.
So our mission today is highly specific. We are unpacking a comprehensive 2026 source guide that looks at the 10 best AI logo generator tools for beginners.
But we should clarify, we're not just going to sit here and read a software directory to you.
Oh, definitely not. We are doing a full extraction today. We want to pull out the exact workflows, the underlying algorithmic logic, and those hidden design secrets.
The stuff that turns anyone, literally anyone, regardless of their technical background, into the architect of a highly polished brand identity.
Exactly. Because we have crossed this really fascinating threshold. Democratized design is basically the core of this entire shift.
Yeah, we are no longer talking about tools that just spit out a single isolated image file based on a keyword.
Right, like the old clip art generators.
Exactly. These 2026 platforms are generating entire breathing ecosystems of corporate branding. They have systematically dismantled the technical learning curve.
Which is huge because that curve used to stop so many incredible business ideas right in their tracks.
It really did. It effectively removes the traditional gatekeepers of corporate design.
So, okay, let's unpack this, because how do these tools actually bridge that terrifying gap, between a vague, fuzzy concept floating around in your head and a professional, tangible brand asset?
An asset you can actually put on a pitch deck confidently.
Exactly. Or a storefront, whether you, the listener, are launching a bootstrap tech startup or maybe just a weekend side hustle.
Or a personal passion project.
Yeah, any of those.
Yeah.
This deep dive is going to give you the exact shortcut to overcoming that initial paralysis.
We're going to show you how the underlying technology actually works so you can look utterly professional on day one.
And looking professional on day one is, well, it's fundamentally about establishing immediate trust with your very first customer, right? Or your first investor.
Absolutely. But to understand how these generative AI tools achieve that, we really need to look at the psychological barrier they are removing first.
Right, the dreaded blank page problem.
Yes. The blank page in design is historically one of the greatest friction points in early stage entrepreneurship.
Oh, I believe it. The cognitive load of traditional design software is just massive.
It is. I mean, before these generative models matured, if you wanted to design a brand identity yourself, you had to understand vector mathematics.
Which sounds terrifying.
It is, and complex typography pairing, color space conversion, plus an entire alphabet soup of file formats.
You were essentially opening up a professional CAD program and just staring at an empty grid.
Exactly. You were asking a baker who just wanted to launch their core product to suddenly become a junior art director overnight.
Which is incredibly unfair, if you think about it.
The psychological barrier that creates is immense. It's the paralysis of unlimited variables.
Right, when you have access to 16 million colors.
And 10,000 fonts. The fear of making the wrong choice just paralyzes the decision-making process entirely.
It's like the paradox of choice, but applied to business creation. You sit down with this great concept, open a blank canvas, and your brain just completely freezes.
You start second-guessing the semantic weight of a specific shade of blue.
Yes. Or you wonder if a geometric sans serif font communicates innovation, or if it just looks, bland.
And suddenly, your launch is delayed by 3 months because you are caught in this loop of microscopic design decisions.
It's like writer's block for business. So that is precisely the friction point these 2026 AI tools have targeted.
They solve it by completely changing the input mechanism. You no longer interact with geometric coordinates.
Or those horrible hex code sliders.
Right. You interact using natural language, you provide your brand name, your industry, and just a semantic description of your style.
Like saying you want something brutalist or minimalist or playful.
Exactly. The AI instantly parses that language and provides fully formed visual concepts for you to react to.
And our sources highlight a staggering metric here. Most beginners using these tools find a logo they are genuinely proud of within 15 to 20 minutes.
15 minutes, that speed completely upends the traditional agency timeline.
It really does. But I have to push back a little here.
Okay, go ahead.
If the AI is doing all the actual pixel arrangement, picking the colors, defining the spatial relationships based on an algorithm, doesn't the user kind of lose their connection to the brand?
That's a very common concern.
Because it feels a bit like buying your corporate identity off the rack instead of having it tailored.
Well, that was definitely the prevailing fear among traditionalists. But the behavioral data in our sources shows the exact opposite effect.
Really? How so?
The sheer speed to a highly competent baseline actually empowers the creator. If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is a profound transition from creation to curation.
Meaning the human role shifts from generating the raw material from scratch to acting more like an editor.
Or a creative director. Precisely. Think about the fragility of a new business idea.
It's very delicate.
Extremely. When you first decide to launch, your motivation is at its absolute peak, but your momentum is fragile.
Right. The slightest roadblock can derail you.
Exactly. If you spend 3 weeks fighting with Bezier curves in vector software or managing a frustrating back and forth with an expensive freelance designer,
That momentum just drains right out of you.
frustration replaces excitement. But if you can sit down and within 15 minutes see a high-fidelity visual representation of your dream,
Oh, that's a massive psychological catalyst.
it makes the abstract business feel instantly real. The curation process, filtering and tweaking the AI's suggestions, provides enough ownership to establish a deep connection.
But it completely removes the technical friction that usually causes early abandonment. So it provides this, dopamine hit of progress that propels you to go buy the domain or file the paperwork. It visually validates the idea.
It does.
Okay, so if we are stepping into this role of creative director, we really need to know exactly what our automated employee is doing behind the scenes.
Yes, we need to understand the technical heavy lifting occurring so we can pilot these tools effectively.
What is the AI actually automating in these platforms?
It is automating the mathematically precise foundational rules of graphic design. It's not just running a randomized script.
It's not just pasting a text layer next to some stock vector art.
No, not at all. It's performing highly sophisticated symbol selection based on the semantic associations of your industry.
Okay, interesting.
And it is generating color palettes that don't just look aesthetically pleasing, but are mathematically complementary.
And I read they strictly adhere to accessibility standards too, right?
Yes, rigorously, like the Web Content Accessibility Guideline.
The WCAG standards for contrast. That is a massive pain point for human designers.
It really is. A human amateur will frequently place, say, medium gray text over a light blue background.
Because it looks sleek or modern to them?
Right, on their specific Retina monitor, completely unaware that it totally fails the contrast ratio required for legibility.
Especially for visually impaired users, or honestly, just someone looking at their phone in bright sunlight.
Exactly. The AI algorithms have the WCAG 4.5:1 contrast ratios completely baked into their generation parameters.
Wow, so it won't even let you make an inaccessible mistake.
It physically prevents it. Furthermore, it's automating the incredibly complex discipline of font pairing.
Oh man, anyone who follows design knows that typography is the true tell of a professional.
It's the ultimate giveaway.
Finding a display typeface that captures the brand's personality and then pairing it with a highly legible body typeface for taglines.
Without them competing visually.
Right. That usually takes years of trained intuition.
Because it requires an understanding of X heights, stroke contrast, and historical typographic classifications.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
The AI just bypasses the need for human intuition by analyzing massive data sets of historically successful typography pairings.
So it just calculates the geometric harmony between the letter forms instantly.
Exactly. It also handles layout composition. It uses algorithms to calculate the golden ratio and optical balancing.
Just to determine the precise negative space between the logo mark and the word mark.
Yes. All of that math happens in milliseconds.
So what does this all actually mean for the user? It means the generative model is acting as a senior art director, enforcing centuries of established design theory instantaneously.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's look at the example from our sources. Say you input that you are launching a pediatric dentistry practice,
Okay.
and you tell the prompt you want a playful, modern aesthetic.
Right. So a human designer would need to conduct a lot of competitive research there.
to figure out how to visually represent playful in a medical context.
Exactly. Without crossing the line into looking unprofessional or untrustworthy, you are dealing with people's children and healthcare.
But the AI parses that semantic prompt immediately. It maps pediatric dentistry to a need for clinical cleanliness and trust.
But it also maps playful to a requirement for approachability.
So the algorithmic output avoids sharp, aggressive angles entirely
It generates a stylized, perhaps slightly rounded tooth icon.
and pairs it with a geometric sans serif font that feels friendly but highly legible.
And then it calculates the exact spatial distribution so the icon doesn't overpower the practice's name. It is quite literally performing the math of design.
The math of design. I love that phrasing. It's applying geometry, spatial ratios, and color theory algorithms to yield this optimized result.
But this raises an important question for us.
Just
If the underlying technology across the industry is all leveraging these same fundamental design algorithms, how do we evaluate the tools themselves?
right. How do we separate a truly great AI logo generator from just a mediocre wrapper in a saturated market?
To navigate that, we need to establish strict criteria for what constitutes beginner-friendly in 2026. It's not just about a simple interface anymore.
According to the source guide, there are 4 non-negotiable hallmarks of a top-tier tool.
Let's hear them.
Prompt-based generation, intuitive drag-and-drop customization, essential export options, and comprehensive brand DNA suggestions.
Let's break those down, starting with prompt-based generation. We touched on this slightly, but why is semantic language input vastly superior to browsing template libraries?
Because template libraries are inherently generic by design. A template must be created to appeal to the broadest possible denominator.
So it can be sold multiple times to different people.
Exactly. When you browse templates, you are looking at work created for nobody in particular, just hoping you can contort your brand to fit into it.
While prompt-based generation, which is powered by large language models, is entirely bespoke.
Right. When you use conversational language to describe your specific intersection of industry and motion, the AI synthesizes those concepts to create a net new asset.
It allows for so much nuance.
The second hallmark is drag-and-drop customization. Because look, even with incredible AI, the output is a starting point.
You still need to curate.
Exactly. If the tool forces you to understand complex layer masks, grouping, or path editing, just to move an icon slightly to the left,
Then it fails the beginner-friendly test completely.
the mechanics of editing need to be as frictionless as rearranging apps on a smartphone screen.
If the customization phase requires you to consult documentation or go watch a third-party tutorial on YouTube, the cognitive load is too high.
The interface must be entirely intuitive.
Agreed.
The third hallmark is where things get highly technical, but I'd argue it's the most critical: export options.
Ah, yes.
Our sources are very clear about the massive difference between a tool that gives you a free, low-resolution PNG and a tool that provides scalable SVG vector files.
I'm so glad we were spending time here because this is the exact trap that catches 90% of beginners.
They generate this beautiful logo, download the free PNG,
And then, when they try to get a sign printed for their physical storefront, the printer tells them the file is completely unusable.
it is the most common and costly mistake in early-stage branding.
So let's visualize why this matters.
Let's use an analogy. A raster image file, like a PNG or a JPEG, is essentially a mosaic.
Okay, a mosaic.
It's a fixed rectangular grid of thousands of tiny, colored, square pixels. If you take a 4x6 printed photograph and physically stretch it to the size of a billboard,
The image doesn't adapt.
right, those tiny squares simply get larger, and the entire image becomes incredibly blurry, blocky, and pixelated.
That is exactly what happens when you try to scale up a PNG. The resolution is permanently locked at the very moment of export.
But a vector file, like an SVG or an EPS, operates on entirely different physics.
It is not a mosaic of squares.
No. A vector file is a set of mathematical equations defining points, lines, and curves on a Cartesian plane. It's like a highly complex rubber band.
I love that, a mathematical rubber band.
Because it's just math, you can stretch that rubber band to fit on a tiny half-inch smartphone favicon, or you can stretch it to cover the side of a commercial airplane.
And the edges remain infinitely, perfectly sharp.
Because the computer simply recalculates the math for the new size.
That is a brilliant way to explain it. The structural integrity of the mathematical curve never degrades.
And understanding that difference between the pixel mosaic and the mathematical rubber band is the single most important technical hurdle a founder must clear.
Before they invest a dime in any of these platforms, absolutely.
You must ensure the tool provides those scalable SVG files. If it doesn't, you are just buying a temporary placeholder.
And you will inevitably have to pay a human designer to rebuild your logo from scratch the second you need physical merchandise or large-scale signage.
It is the ultimate hidden tax in the design software world.
It really is.
Now, the fourth and final hallmark is brand color and font suggestions. Because a logo does not exist in a vacuum, right?
No, it's the anchor point for a much broader visual identity.
The tool needs to provide the exact technical specifications of your brand DNA, the color codes, and the typography names.
So the user can maintain absolute consistency across their website, their pitch decks, their social media.
Exactly. Without those specifications, a beginner will inevitably start guessing colors.
Which leads directly to brand dilution. We really need to talk about what those specifications actually are, specifically the color codes.
Because the complexity there often catches people totally off guard.
It does. A robust tool won't just give you a color name like navy blue. It will give you the HEX code, the RGB values, and the CMYK values.
This is the perfect place to pause because a lot of people listening might see those acronyms and wonder why on earth they need 3 different codes for the exact same color.
It seems redundant, right?
Yeah. Why does the math of color change depending on where it lives?
Because the physics of how we see color changes depending on the medium. Let's start with RGB.
Which stands for red, green, and blue.
Exactly. This is an additive color model used exclusively for digital screens, your phone, your laptop, a television.
Because screens emit light.
Right. They start completely dark, and they add varying intensities of red, green, and blue light to create colors.
And when you combine all 3 at 100% intensity, you get pure white light.
Precisely. Now, HEX codes are simply a 6-digit alphanumeric shorthand for those exact RGB light values, used primarily in web coding.
So RGB and HEX are for anything that plugs into a wall or has a battery.
Yes, but CMYK is entirely different.
That stands for cyan, magenta, yellow, and key, which is black, right?
The S key is black. This is a subtractive color model used for physical printing.
Because paper doesn't emit light.
It reflects ambient room light. Ink absorbs or subtracts certain wavelengths of that light.
Oh, so when you mix all the CMYK inks together, you don't get white.
No, you get a muddy, dark brown or black because all the light is being absorbed by the ink.
Which perfectly explains why a vibrant, glowing neon green that looks incredible on your MacBook screen suddenly looks flat and dull when you print it on a flyer.
The physical ink literally cannot replicate the glowing light of the screen. It is out of the printer's color gamut.
That makes so much sense. And a top-tier AI logo generator understands this constraint.
It will automatically map your digital RGB colors to the closest possible CMYK equivalent,
ensuring that your digital brand and your physical brand look visually cohesive, even though the underlying physics of the colors are fundamentally different.
Exactly. That's what a professional tool does for you.
Okay, so with our criteria firmly established, we require prompt-based semantic generation, fictionless drag-and-drop editing, infinitely scalable SVG exports, and comprehensive RGB CMYK brand DNA guidelines.
That's a solid checklist.
It's time to analyze the actual 2026 landscape. The source guide categorizes these tools based on the user's operational needs.
Let's start with the heavyweights.
Yes, these are the platforms that go far beyond just logo generation and offer full business-in-a-box solutions. We're looking at Looka, Tailor Brands, and Designs.ai.
Let's start with Looka. Our sources refer to it as the gold standard.
They do. How did Looka earn that reputation?
Through the sheer breadth and polish of its post-generation output. The initial generation process is highly refined. You input your parameters, and it uses its algorithms to produce really diverse, sophisticated options.
But its true differentiation is what happens the millisecond after you finalize your logo design.
Yes. Looka instantly extrapolates that single logo into a comprehensive living brand kit.
We hear the term brand kit thrown around constantly in marketing. What does that actually manifest as for the end user inside the Looka ecosystem?
It manifests as hundreds of perfectly formatted, ready-to-deploy corporate assets generated instantaneously.
So it applies your new logo, brand colors, and typography to business card layouts.
Yes, and it generates social media profile images and banners perfectly cropped to the exact constantly changing pixel dimensions of Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram.
That alone saves hours of frustrating cropping work.
Oh, absolutely. It creates professional email signatures too. But the most valuable asset it generates is the brand guideline document.
The brand guidelines. I really cannot stress enough how crucial this is.
It's a game changer.
Having a brand guideline is essentially having a strictly enforced rulebook for your own company. It is the ultimate preventative measure against amateurism.
It tells you your primary brand color is this exact HEX code. Do not try to eyeball it when you design a promotional flyer.
Yes. It explicitly outlines the required negative space around the logo, preventing you from crowding it with text and making it look claustrophobic.
It acts as a set of permanent guardrails. It is the anchor that prevents brand mutation.
Brand mutation, that's a great term. Because without it, founders tend to slowly drift, right?
Exactly. Using a slightly different blue here, a slightly different font there. And over a year, the brand looks chaotic and untrustworthy.
Looka provides the infrastructure to prevent that drift. You can purchase the core assets for a one-time fee, but their business model is built around an annual subscription that keeps this living kit updated as platforms change their image dimension requirements.
Which is a very smart model for them and very convenient for the user.
Moving to the next heavyweight, we have Tailor Brands. Here is where the strategic evolution of these platforms gets really interesting.
Tailor Brands isn't just a design tool anymore. It is a full operational platform.
Yeah, they include website builders, digital business cards, and social media scheduling. But the source guide highlights something else. They offer fully integrated business formation services.
Yes. They have integrated legal entity formation APIs directly alongside the visual brand creation workflow.
Which means they will literally file your LLC paperwork. Now, you listening right now might be thinking, I am absolutely not letting a logo generator file my legal paperwork with the state government.
It sounds slightly dystopian at first glance, I admit.
It really does.
Yeah.
But there is a very specific, brilliant business logic behind why this platform is doing it.
It is a masterclass in capturing user intent.
How so?
Tailor Brands recognized years ago that a logo is almost never the end goal. It is simply the first domino in a long chain of entrepreneurial tasks.
Right.
They map the psychological life cycle of a founder. The moment a founder sees their new logo rendered beautifully on a screen is the moment of maximum emotional motivation.
That dopamine hit we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Tailor Brands captures that exact spike in momentum and says, don't lose this energy navigating confusing state government websites. Click this button and we will handle the legal filing, register your domain, and host your website.
Wow. They are drastically reducing the friction of starting a company. For a first-time founder who is deeply intimidated by the logistics of registered agents and articles of organization, that all-in-one frictionless approach is incredibly compelling.
You log in with a vague concept, and you log out holding a legally recognized corporate entity with a fully fleshed out visual identity.
It represents a fundamental shift. They're not selling software access, they are selling the instantaneous manifestation of corporate infrastructure.
Beautifully said.
And rounding out this business-in-a-box category is Designs.ai. How do they differentiate themselves from Looka and Tailor Brands?
Designs.ai focuses its infrastructure on sophisticated content creation rather than legal or administrative formation.
Okay.
Their generative AI engine is particularly advanced. It produces complex vector combinations, multicolor text effects, and gradients that genuinely mimic the nuanced decisions of a human illustrator.
So the output feels a bit more design, less templated.
Yes, but their broader ecosystem is built for scale. The logo integrates natively with their suite of tools, which includes an AI video maker, an automated social media graphic generator, and a brand voice analyzer.
A brand voice analyzer. Wait, so they are extending the brand identity from the visual realm into the tonal and semantic realm.
Exactly. If your visual brand is set as authoritative and traditional, the AI will actually flag your social media copy if it sounds too casual or uses inappropriate slang.
That is wild.
It enforces consistency across both design and language.
This seems highly targeted at the modern creator economy.
Oh, absolutely. If your business model relies on churning out high volumes of YouTube videos, TikToks, or automated marketing funnels, having your visual identity inherently linked to a video rendering suite drastically reduces your daily operational friction.
It just makes everything cohesive instantly.
Right.
But what if you don't need all that heavy infrastructure? What if you already have your LLC sorted? You don't need a video rendering suite, and you are already building your core business on a very specific platform.
You just need a visual identity that lives inside that specific environment.
Exactly. That brings us to our next category from the sources. The platform natives. Here we are looking at Canva, Wix, and Hatchful by Shopify.
These platforms rely entirely on what we can call the ecosystem advantage.
The logic is beautifully simple, isn't it? The most efficient place to generate and store your brand assets is inside the exact software environment where you are already building your product or executing your daily marketing.
It is exactly like the logic of a closed hardware ecosystem.
Like Apple.
Yes. If you use a MacBook and an iPhone, you buy an Apple TV. You don't buy it because it has the best raw specs on the market.
You buy it because it syncs flawlessly without you having to download third-party bridge apps or manage complex network settings.
It inherently understands your other devices. These platform-native logo makers apply that exact same frictionless logic to web design and e-commerce.
That makes total sense. Let's examine the Canva logo maker. Canva's market penetration is massive in 2026.
It is. Their approach to logo generation leans a bit heavily on template manipulation rather than pure semantic prompting, though.
Which means it requires slightly more curation from the user.
Yes, but the ecosystem advantage is undeniable. Once you finalize that logo, it instantly becomes a native element in your Canva brand kit.
Right. If you are a social media manager or a solo founder spending 3 hours a day inside Canva designing pitch decks, Instagram carousels, and webinar slides.
Having your logo automatically available in the sidebar, already formatted with transparent backgrounds, is a massive daily workflow efficiency.
You never have to deal with downloading files to your desktop and re-uploading them. Plus, Canva allows for free PNG exports, which serves the user who needs something incredibly fast for a digital mock-up.
Then we look at the Wix logo maker.
Now, Wix is one of the dominant website building platforms globally, and our sources note a very specific user experience choice Wix makes.
Yes, they utilize personality questions rather than asking the user to select generic style categories from a drop-down menu.
I found that fascinating. Why is that approach better for a beginner?
Because a beginner often lacks the design vocabulary to accurately describe what they want.
That's true. If a platform asks, do you prefer minimalist or brutalist design, the beginner might just freeze.
Exactly. But Wix will present sliding scales with opposing concepts. Is your brand rebellious or traditional? Is it playful or serious? Is it accessible or exclusive?
So by gamifying the input through these emotional sliders, the underlying algorithm can triangulate a much more accurate aesthetic profile.
Exactly. And again, the ecosystem advantage dictates that once the logo is generated, it is automatically injected into the global header of the website you're actively building on Wix.
Perfectly scaled and color matched to your site theme.
It completely eliminates the agonizing step of downloading the file, navigating back to your web builder, finding the image upload module.
Realizing the background isn't transparent, returning to the design tool to fix it. It implements what we could call headless design. The asset just lives dynamically where it needs to live.
Which brings us to Hatchful, built by Shopify.
Shopify is the undisputed titan of e-commerce infrastructure, and Hatchful is their dedicated generative tool.
And the source guide emphasizes Hatchful's aggressive commitment to removing friction.
Yes, it is intentionally stripped of complex editing features. It is hyper-optimized for speed and specific e-commerce utility.
But its most defining characteristic is its complete lack of a barrier to entry.
It requires absolutely no account creation to begin the generation process.
And it provides fully packaged, high-resolution downloads entirely for free.
Think about the psychology of a new e-commerce founder for a second. They have just spent 4 exhausting days trying to configure international shipping zones, tax APIs, and inventory SKUs inside Shopify.
Their cognitive bandwidth is completely depleted.
The ability to navigate to a URL, click 3 buttons, avoid the friction of creating yet another password, and instantly download a free, properly formatted logo package for their storefront.
It's an absolute lifeline.
It perfectly aligns with Shopify's overarching corporate strategy, doesn't it?
It does. Shopify only makes money when a merchant successfully launches a store and starts processing transactions.
So the logo creation process should never be the bottleneck that prevents a launch.
Therefore, they built a tool to make it utterly frictionless, sacrificing subscription revenue on the software side to accelerate the launch of the core e-commerce business.
It's a classic loss leader strategy, executed brilliantly.
Completely.
Now, these native tools are incredibly convenient, But what if convenience isn't your primary objective?
What if you are a founder who demands a highly unique, deeply thoughtful aesthetic that doesn't feel algorithmic?
Or conversely, what if you have a literal budget of $0, but you absolutely require those essential, infinitely scalable SVG vector files we were raving about?
Let's venture outside the massive ecosystems and examine the wildcards.
The source guide categorizes these as the specialists and the truly free rebels.
Right.
We're talking about Brandmark, Logo AI, Fiverr Logo Maker, and Ucraft.
We should begin with Brandmark, because their approach to algorithmic generation is arguably the most intellectually sophisticated of the group.
Why is that?
Because Brandmark rejects simple keyword checkboxes. It relies almost entirely on parsing full sentences and narrative descriptions.
So rather than clicking a button for technology and a button for blue, you actually write a brief prompt.
Exactly. You might input a sentence like, "We are an artisanal coffee roaster focused on supply chain sustainability and providing early morning clarity."
Oh, wow.
The large language model parses the semantic meaning and the emotional weight of that narrative.
That is incredibly advanced.
But the true standout capability is what they term color intelligence. Brandmark's algorithms analyze the psychological associations of different color combinations and recommend palettes that inherently align with the narrative prompt.
I want to pause on that because it raises an incredibly important question about the intersection of technology and human psychology. Can an algorithm actually comprehend the emotional weight of a brand narrative? Can lines of code understand that early morning clarity requires a specific activating amber, while supply chain sustainability demands a grounded, muted olive green?
It is crucial to understand that the AI does not feel the emotion. It is not empathetic.
Right.
It is, however, highly statistically observant. The model has been trained on millions of data points mapping historically successful human design against specific industries. It recognizes the mathematical correlation between semantic phrases like institutional trust and security in the banking sector and the specific hex codes of navy blue that humans biologically and culturally respond to best.
So it is mathematically modeling human emotional response based on vast historical data sets.
Exactly. It's reverse engineering human psychology through statistics.
That is both slightly unnerving and incredibly powerful for a founder who knows absolutely nothing about color theory.
It's a massive advantage.
Moving to Logo AI, their specialization appears to be spatial rendering and robust mockup generation.
Yes. Logo AI's core generation engine allows a user to simultaneously cross-pollinate different aesthetic styles. You can compare a vintage, hand-drawn look directly against a stark, modern corporate look.
Which is helpful, but the mockups are the true value proposition here, right?
Definitely. A beginner often struggles to conceptualize how a flat 2D vector file on a white screen will translate to the physical world.
It's hard to picture.
So Logo AI instantly renders the logo realistically embossed on a textured leather notebook, or cast in metallic signage on a brick wall, or glowing on a digital billboard.
It provides immediate visual proof of concept. Seeing the logo living in a real-world environment builds that psychological confidence we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
Now let's look at a fascinating pivot, the Fiverr Logo Maker. Fiverr is globally recognized as a massive freelance marketplace connecting businesses with human talent.
Which makes this interesting.
Right. So what is the strategic logic behind them operating a generative AI logo maker? Isn't that cannibalizing their own core business?
On the surface, it appears contradictory, but it is actually a highly sophisticated hybrid model.
How does it work?
They are building a bridge between algorithmic ideation and human finishing. You utilize their generative AI to create a logo for free, leveraging the speed of the machine to establish a strong baseline.
Okay.
But if you review the output and feel it is only 85% complete, perhaps the kerning on the text is slightly off, or the icon needs a specific custom modification the AI can't quite grasp.
The platform seamlessly integrates an API to connect you directly with a professional human designer on Fiverr.
That is exactly it.
That is brilliant. It's exactly like using an AI to instantly render the architectural blueprints and the structural framing for a house, but then hiring a specialized human contractor to come in, install the custom cabinetry, and do the finished carpentry.
That's a perfect analogy. You get the instantaneous speed of algorithmic ideation combined with the bespoke, nuanced finishing of human talent.
For a beginner who is hesitant to rely entirely on an automated system, that hybrid safety net is incredibly appealing.
It's a very smart business move by Fiverr.
Finally, we have the rebel of this group, Ucraft. The source text makes a very specific point about Ucraft being genuinely free.
Yes.
We really need to clarify what that means because free is the most abused word in software marketing.
Oh, without a doubt. In the specific vertical of AI logo generators, the word free almost always carries an asterisk.
As we discussed, the standard industry playbook allows you to use the tool, generate ideas, and even download a low-resolution, non-transparent PNG file for free.
But the exact moment you require the high-resolution files or those critical, scalable SVG vector files we discussed, you hit a hard paywall.
Right, and Ucraft has completely upended that economic model.
They have. They offer genuinely free downloads of both high-resolution PNGs and the fully scalable SVG files. There are no hidden fees and no forced continuity subscriptions.
That is a massive market disruption. We established earlier that the vector file is the absolute non-negotiable requirement if you ever intend to print your logo on anything larger than a business card.
It is the holy grail for founders on a tight budget.
By commoditizing that file and giving it away, Ucraft is essentially vaporizing the final financial barrier to professional design infrastructure.
For a bootstrapped founder operating with a literal budget of zero, it is an unparalleled resource.
And it forces the premium paid platforms to justify their cost by competing on the intelligence of their generation algorithms and the comprehensive utility of their brand kits, rather than simply holding the essential vector mathematics hostage behind a paywall.
Exactly. It raises the bar for everyone else.
So we have thoroughly surveyed the landscape. We understand the heavyweights, the platform natives, the specialists, and the rebels.
We've covered a lot of ground.
You, the listener, possess the knowledge to select the exact tool that aligns with your operational reality. But here is the hard truth of the matter.
What's that?
Possessing the right tool is utterly insufficient.
Yes.
Having a $6,000 espresso machine on your kitchen counter does not inherently make you a master barista.
It certainly does not.
You must understand the mechanics of the machine. You must know how to pilot the software. Which brings us to the operational core of our deep dive, the masterclass workflow.
This is where the magic actually happens.
We are going to deconstruct the exact step-by-step procedure required to move from an empty prompt box to a meticulously organized professional file hierarchy.
The most effective mental model for this workflow is to visualize a funnel.
A funnel.
You begin with extremely broad conceptual inputs at the top, and you methodically narrow your focus, descending through customization until you reach the microscopic administrative details of file organization at the very bottom.
Okay, so step one at the top of the funnel is prompt engineering.
Yes, the source guide is highly explicit regarding this phase.
Yeah.
Specificity is the ultimate currency.
You cannot simply type your brand name, select blue, and expect magic.
No, you must carefully assemble your inputs, your specific niche, your brand name, a foundational color preference, and critically, 2 to 3 highly precise semantic adjectives that define your brand personality.
Those semantic adjectives act as the algorithmic steering wheel, right?
Exactly. The large language model weights those specific words heavily when determining the visual output.
That maps perfectly to what we see in broader generative AI. If you just type accounting business, the AI has no direction.
It relies on the most basic statistical average of its training data.
And it will output a generic, soulless vector of a calculator or a bar chart.
But if you prompt it with aggressive, hypermodern, brutalist accounting firm, suddenly the diffusion model has strict parameters.
It knows to deploy sharp angles, stark, high-contrast monochromatic palettes, and a heavy, imposing sans-serif typeface.
You force the AI to generate a specific identity rather than a generic placeholder.
Okay, so once the generative engine provides those initial highly targeted options, you move down the funnel to step 2, customization.
Yes, because even the most sophisticated prompt rarely yields a flawless, 100% complete logo on the initial generation.
You must engage with the editor, and the source text provides an essential rule for color customization here.
It says to utilize a single primary color as your anchor and allow the AI's algorithms to suggest the mathematically complementary accent colors.
Which makes sense, because amateurs frequently destroy a good design by attempting to manually balance 4 or 5 distinct colors.
It always ends up looking muddy or chaotic.
And typography customization is equally critical here. The source guide provides a brilliant cheat sheet for matching typographic classifications to brand tone. Can you break down the underlying logic of that typography guide?
Certainly, it revolves around the historical and psychological associations we have with letter forms.
Okay.
If your brand positioning is modern, tech-centric, or focused on forward momentum, you should anchor your identity with a sans serif typeface.
Those are the clean geometric letter forms without the little feet on the edges, right?
Exactly, devoid of ornamental strokes. Companies like Google, Apple, and modern SaaS platforms rely on them because they scale perfectly on digital screens and communicate efficiency.
That makes sense. What about brands that need to feel older or more established?
Conversely, if your brand relies on conveying authority, deep expertise, or historical stability, such as a wealth management firm or an academic institution, you should utilize a serif typeface.
The ones with the little feet and flourishes.
Yes. These letter forms feature varied stroke weights and structural flourishes, communicating tradition and institutional weight. Think of the masthead of the New York Times.
Right. And the third category?
Finally, if you are building an artisan brand, a boutique bakery, or a highly personal coaching business, a script or hand-lettered typeface communicates bespoke human craftsmanship.
So the customization phase is where you verify that the AI has selected the correct typographic classification to carry your specific semantic message.
Precisely. You have to double-check its work.
So we have engineered our prompt, and we have meticulously customized our color anchors and typographic hierarchy.
Now comes step 3.
The phase where the vast majority of beginners completely abandon their professionalism. Testing variations.
Yes, you absolutely cannot design a single static version of your logo and consider the job complete.
Because a corporate identity is not a static painting hanging in a gallery.
No, it is a living asset that must adapt and survive across wildly different digital and physical habitats.
The source guide explicitly mandates testing 4 critical variations before finalizing any design. Let's go through them. First is the primary horizontal layout.
This is the standard configuration where the icon sits to the left of the word mark.
It is required for website headers, official letterheads, and email signatures. It must be wide and vertically compact.
Right. The second variation is the stacked layout. This is where the icon is centered directly above the brand name.
Now, why is the stacked variation an absolute necessity in 2026?
Because of the tyrannical geometry of the social media profile picture.
Oh, of course.
Almost every dominant digital platform, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, LinkedIn, forces your brand identity into a tight one-to-one square or a circular crop.
And if you only possess a wide horizontal logo and you attempt to force it into a circular container,
The algorithm will either chop off the first and last letters of your brand name, or it will shrink the entire asset down so drastically that it becomes an illegible, blurry line.
a stacked variation is structurally designed to fill a square or circular container perfectly, maximizing your brand visibility on a mobile screen.
Exactly.
There is nothing that screams unprofessional amateur faster than navigating to a brand's Instagram page and seeing their horizontal logo awkwardly sliced in half by a circular crop.
It instantly broadcasts that they lack operational attention to detail.
What are the final 2 variations required?
The third is the icon-only or mark-only variation. There are specific digital environments where even a stacked logo contains too much visual information.
Like the tiny favicon in the browser tab.
Yes, the 16 by 16 pixel favicon, or the standalone app icon on a smartphone home screen. You require a distilled version of your identity that relies entirely on the core symbol without any typography.
And the 4th variation.
Finally, you must test light and dark background variations. Your primary logo might look spectacular on a stark white background, but what occurs when a media partner places it on a dark gray sponsor banner?
If your typography is charcoal, it completely vanishes.
You must design and export a reverse color variation, often pure white, to ensure legibility across any external environment.
That is a masterclass in anticipating friction. Which brings us to the absolute bottom of the workflow funnel, step 4, exporting and organizing.
This is the administrative reality of design.
You must export the PNG with a transparent background. If it is not transparent, you will carry a hideous white bounding box around your logo wherever you deploy it.
Which looks terrible. And you must export the scalable SVG or EPS vector file for all physical printing and large-scale scaling.
You should generate a PDF version, as traditional print shops and corporate partners frequently require it. And you must export that specific favicon dimension.
And please, I am begging you on behalf of the source text, implement strict organizational discipline.
Yes. You must store these assets in a dedicated cloud-backed folder using clear, standardized naming conventions.
Do not leave your core brand identity languishing in your computer's downloads folder titled untitled underscore logo underscore final underscore version underscore 7 underscore copy.png.
Please don't do that. When a vendor or a journalist asks for your vector file, you should be able to retrieve and email it in under 10 seconds. It is a fundamental signal of operational competence.
It separates the hobbyists from the operators.
So we have thoroughly mapped the perfect workflow. However, we must address a persistent reality.
And what's that?
Even with access to the most sophisticated algorithmic tools, and even when adhering strictly to that workflow funnel, beginners continually fall into predictable aesthetic traps.
Yeah.
There's a very specific visual signature that immediately broadcasts, "I generated this with AI in 5 minutes and didn't know when to stop."
The dreaded AI look.
Exactly. How do we ensure the final brand asset possesses actual longevity? That brings us to our final core topic: designing for durability, or how to avoid the AI look.
The AI look is almost universally characterized by a complete lack of restraint. It is the aesthetic of overcomplication.
The source text outlines 4 professional protocols to ensure your design endures. Let's hit the first one.
The first protocol concerns typography. You must ruthlessly prioritize simple, highly readable fonts.
Complex, distressed, heavily ornamented, or highly stylized trend fonts might look incredibly dynamic on your monitor today, but they fail structurally when scaled down.
And they age terribly. A trendy, hyper-stylized font will look like a dated relic of a very specific microtrend within 24 months.
It's the design equivalent of wearing neon parachute pants to a board meeting. It might capture attention for a moment, but it ultimately detracts from your credibility.
Precisely. The second protocol is the rigorous enforcement of consistent brand colors.
We discussed the brand guidelines earlier, but its application is critical here.
You must deploy your exact HEX, RGB, and CMYK codes without deviation.
If your digital logo utilizes a highly specific electric blue, but your physical mailers use a muted navy because you failed to check the CMYK conversion, your brand identity fractures.
Consistency builds memory structures in the consumer's brain. Inconsistency destroys them.
The third protocol is continuous contextual testing, which we covered, ensuring legibility across white, dark, and photographic backgrounds.
But it is this fourth protocol that I find the most philosophically profound.
Let's hear it.
The source text states, avoid overly complex designs. Simple is memorable. Resist the urge for elaborate emblems.
That protocol addresses the great paradox of modern democratized design.
It really does.
When an amateur gains access to incredibly powerful generative AI, their immediate psychological instinct is additive. They want to utilize every single feature.
They think, to prove this is a professional, high-value brand, I need a complex, multi-layered gradient, a highly detailed 3D shield emblem, 3 interlocking swooshes, a drop shadow, and a complex tagline.
They falsely equate visual complexity with professional value.
Because if the logo is too simple, they feel like they cheated.
Yes, they feel like they didn't extract enough labor out of the software.
Exactly. It is a labor-value fallacy. But the true masters of graphic design, the agencies that build the world's most iconic and enduring corporate identities, operate on the exact opposite philosophy.
They utilize subtractive design.
They relentlessly strip away gradients, shadows, and secondary elements until only the absolute, essential, irreducible geometric shape remains.
But I have to challenge that logic for a moment.
Okay, good.
If every single founder listens to this advice, and everyone utilizes AI to generate clean, minimalist, highly distilled logos, doesn't the entire commercial landscape homogenize?
That's a fair point.
If we all strip our identities down to irreducible geometry, how does a brand possibly stand out in a sea of simple shapes?
That is the ultimate existential anxiety of brand creation. But resolving that anxiety requires a fundamental paradigm shift in how we view the logo itself.
How so?
The source text leverages brilliant historical examples to prove this point. Examine Nike, Apple, or Twitter.
Okay, let's look at Nike.
The Nike swoosh is not a complex illustration of a shoe or an athlete. It is literally a single, mathematically pure, tapering, curved line.
And the Apple logo is a flat, monochromatic silhouette of a piece of fruit with a geometric circle removed from the side.
They are almost absurdly simple.
A first grader could draw them from memory with a crayon.
And that is exactly the strategic objective. They are universally legible, infinitely scalable, single-shape designs.
They outlast complex illustrations because they are structurally sound.
But they do not feel homogenized or the same as everything else because of context and execution.
Ah, right. Consistency.
Yes, deploying that simple shape in the exact right environments with the exact right typography and messaging over years and decades is what builds recognition.
A logo is not meant to be a complex mural telling your entire corporate history.
Exactly. The logo is merely a vessel. It is an empty container.
It is the corporation's actions, the tactile quality of its products, the empathy of its customer service, and the tone of its marketing that slowly fills that simple visual vessel with emotional meaning and value.
A complex logo tries to shout the entire story at once and inevitably fails. A simple logo quietly leaves room for the business to actually write its story.
The logo is merely a vessel. I want you, the listener, to really think about that. That completely reframes the immense pressure of the blank page we discussed at the beginning.
It does.
You're not tasked with capturing the entire soul and future trajectory of your company in a 500-pixel graphic. You are simply designing a clean, structurally sound, highly recognizable container that you will diligently fill with value over time.
That is an incredibly freeing realization. It removes the impossible burden of expecting the AI to act as a magician.
And allows you to utilize it for what it truly is, a highly efficient, mathematically precise execution tool.
Exactly.
As we bring this extensive deep dive to a close, let's synthesize the landscape we've explored today.
We covered a lot.
We began by acknowledging a monumental paradigm shift in 2026. Generative AI logo platforms have comprehensively democratized professional corporate branding.
The traditional gatekeepers, the prohibitive costs, the steep technical learning curves, the software complexity have been completely dismantled.
Anyone, regardless of their financial runway or their prior technical expertise, can bypass the paralysis of the blank page and construct a mathematically optimized, legally sound, visually striking brand identity in a single afternoon.
We deconstructed the specialized tools driving the shift, analyzing the massive vertically integrated infrastructure of Luca and Taylor brands,
The frictionless e-commerce optimized speed of Hatchful.
and the disruptive vector democratizing economics of Ucraft.
More importantly, we established that the human element has not been rendered obsolete. It has simply evolved.
The founder is no longer the manual draftsperson fighting with Bezier curves. The founder is the strategic curator, piloting the AI through semantic prompting and rigorous algorithmic curation.
There is a quote buried in the source material that you highlighted earlier, and I believe it perfectly encapsulates the thesis of this entire technological shift. It reads, "Consistency is what turns a logo into a recognizable brand. AI gives you the starting point. What you build with it is up to you."
The algorithmic engine can flawlessly manufacture the mathematical rubber band, but you alone must decide where and how far to stretch it.
The technology guarantees a baseline of absolute professionalism, but true market differentiation must now emanate from the internal reality of the business itself.
Which leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does. And it leaves me with a final provocative thought, something for you to deeply ponder as you analyze the brands competing for your attention today.
What's that?
If these generative AI tools now allow absolutely anyone to manifest a flawless, geometrically aligned, psychologically color-optimized, perfectly accessible visual identity in 15 minutes, what happens to the value of visual design?
Will good design eventually lose its historical status as a reliable signal of a premium, trustworthy company?
It is a profound structural question for the economy. If algorithmic perfection becomes the accessible baseline for every single participant in the market, then visual perfection is completely neutralized as a competitive differentiator.
Exactly.
In the near future, if every single logo, website, and digital asset looks impeccably, flawlessly perfect, will the only true way left to differentiate your brand be the invisible things?
The visceral elements an algorithm cannot generate.
Yes. I'm talking about the actual empathy of your customer service interactions, the tactile, physical quality of your product in someone's hands, and the genuine, unautomatable human connection you build with your community.
It implies a fascinating paradox. By completely automating and commoditizing the visual shell of a corporation, AI will ruthlessly force businesses to become infinitely more authentic and deeply human at their operational core in order to survive.
The technology has cleared the view. The visual identity is now crystal clear and effortless to acquire. But now that we can all see the container perfectly, the defining question is, what are you actually going to put inside it?
That's the real challenge now.
Keep that in mind the next time you open a prompt box. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to AI Creator World Podcast. If you found this episode valuable, make sure to follow the podcast, subscribe on YouTube, and share this episode with another creator who is building their future online. For deeper guides, AI tools, and step-by-step growth strategies, visit our website at aicreatorworld.net. And remember, in the age of artificial intelligence, creators who learn faster will lead the future. See you in the next episode. Bye!